We are preparing to go live. All right, everybody, we are live on Facebook and live here on Zoom. We are so excited for tonight's event. We've missed having virtual tastings for these last couple of weeks while we kind of wrapped up our summer fun tour. But tonight we are thrilled to welcome Jim from, say it with me, Willamette, not Willamette, Willamette. Jim is going to do a little tasting with some of his wines for us. He also has an amazing giveaway. So those of you who pre-registered, you knew that he's giving away a barrel tonight. So if you would like to be eligible to win that barrel, you will have to pick it up here in New Hampshire. So just keep that in mind. But Jim also has a little surprise giveaway for you as well. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. Jim, I'm going to let you tell everybody what the little surprise giveaway is going to be. And by little, I mean not little, amazing. So, oh, Jim, you're frozen. Hold on. There you are. Okay.
Carol Ann, thank you very much. You know, we do have a few slides to show you as I present these wines this evening. And what that first slide will give you an idea of, give you a little bit of an image of really a grand prize that we have for one of your viewers tonight. This, there you can see our winery there, Willamette Valley Vineyards, on the top of this hill in the Salem Hills of the Willamette Valley. This is actually where I started back. You know, I actually found this land back in 1981, so that's 40 years ago, and cleared the land and started planting in 1983. And here you see my first vines that I planted back during that time period. But I wanted to let everybody know that my wife Jan built a couple of suites that are right adjacent to the cellar, right here in this wine, or the winery at the top of the hill you see. And what we're offering tonight is a weekend suite stay at the winery. And all you have to do, all two people have to do, is to get to Portland, Oregon, and we'll take it from there. And we have a chef that in the tasting room, they'll keep you fed. We have colleagues that would love to show you other Oregon wineries and vineyards, and we'll provide you with a remarkable weekend here at Willamette Valley Vineyards. That's our grand prize.
Awesome. So I hope you're all very excited. I'm just going to mention a couple more things before we let Jim really start the show, but I just really thought it would be great for you all to know what you could potentially win for tuning in tonight. We haven't told you how you can win, but you have to be here to win. So, of course, thrilled to have Jim here with us tonight. We also have Christian, Darrell, Zach, and Chad here. So if you need anything, go ahead, leave any questions, concerns, comments you have in the chat, and one of us will be able to take care of you. Jim is going to be tasting through a few wines tonight. Those of you who pre-registered received a coupon so you could taste along. We'd love to know what you are tasting along with tonight. So let us know in the chat on Zoom or on Facebook. And yeah, Jim, I'm going to let you take over now. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew who their support team was.
Well, thank you, Carol Ann. You know, I really appreciate the help of you and the others here that are here, like Christian, Zach, thank you, and Zach, and also wanted to thank Darrell Plouffe, who represents our winery on the East Coast. You know, I first met her actually on the East Coast, attracted her out of upstate New York, where she came to the winery, and then actually she fell in love with Oregon, but she also got married at the winery. So it's a very romantic place. And so I'm hoping that I'll get to see some of you that are here in this program tonight actually come and visit us. I live here at the winery. I lived only about 110 steps away from the winery, and I have for the last 40 years. So and I'd love to show you this remarkable place. And Carol Ann, if you could put that last slide up, pardon me, that first slide you showed, I thought maybe I'd tell a couple of stories about this. And while we're starting, yeah, that first slide, while we're starting, I'd like you to at least, if you've got a little Pinot Gris, put that in your glass and taste along with me as we hear a little bit more about the Oregon wine story. You know, when I started back planting these vines in 1983, there was really just only a handful of us growing grapes and making wine in Oregon. And now there's over 700 wineries in Oregon, over 1,500 commercial vineyards. And this Pinot Gris, the Pinot Gris grape variety, was first planted in the United States in a vineyard here in the Willamette Valley by the first winemaker that came to Oregon from California that decided to choose the Willamette Valley to plant his vines. But actually our industry got started back in the late 1950s, where a fellow who studied winemaking and viticulture, horticulture at that time at UC Davis, was a fellow named Richard Sommer. And he also studied the weather, and he told his professors. Now his professors were really concentrating with him on, how to grow a wine industry in Napa and Sonoma. But what he wanted to do is he felt it was much wiser to grow the cool climate, the thin-skinned grape varieties like Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir, much further north. And so he raised his hand in class and he said, really, wouldn't it be better if we were planting Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and Chardonnay much further north? And his professor said, you'll never get your grapes ripe any further north up in Oregon. And so they discouraged him from going there, but he did. And so he came up and he wanted to start a winery. He started the first winery making vinifera wines like Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, following Prohibition in Oregon. And in order to figure out how to get a winery license, he had to hire a lawyer. And so when he came up to Oregon, he located in a place called near Roseburg, Oregon, which is really in southern Oregon. And he got in his pickup after bringing his cuttings up and planting them, and he needed to find a lawyer. So he went into the town of Roseburg to find himself a lawyer, and he hired my dad and to help him get a winery license. And my dad brought lots of things home from his clients, and he brought home Richard Sommer's wine. And that's when I was 10 years old. My brother was 12. And my dad shared that wine with us at the dinner table. And that's when I got into wine. So here, this is the slope I first planted. This is up actually in the Willamette Valley. So I got started very early. And this vineyard right here is Pinot Noir, and it has two clones of the original natural clones that came up from California with the California winemakers like Richard Sommer and a fellow named David Lett. They brought up two clones, Permard and Vadensville. And then over on the left-hand side of your screen is the new Dijon clones. So that's quite a story I'm going to tell you when we get into that wine. But when you taste this Pinot Gris, you put this up to your nose, you smell the aromas that you get out of the glass. You're going to get, pear, green apple, citrus. And then when you taste that, you're going to pick up those kind of flavors as well as some honeydew. And so when you think about it, you think about, well, what is going to go great with this wine? What we call this the salmon wine here in Oregon. So grilled salmon is a perfect companion, seafood. But for those of you who aren't into seafood, try baked chicken. Now, Pinot Gris is the most planted white grape variety in the state of Oregon, which is kind of surprising. And it was first planted in America in the Willamette Valley by David Lett, who came up from California, the second winemaker to come up from California, but he came up all the way up into the Willamette Valley. So the next slide I wanted to show you is Oregon. As you can see, Oregon, it's a big state. It's the 10th largest state in the Union by square miles. And you can also see in this map the different American viticultural areas of Oregon. And so Oregon, France is actually 2.5 times the size of Oregon. So you could put Oregon down over France and kind of trim off the edges of France. But Oregon has as many different microclimates, climatic conditions, and soils as does France. And so we can grow really the full range of varieties in Oregon. And it's been over this time period, over this 40 years, that we've discovered this. And so here at Willamette Valley Vineyards, Jarell and I own, amongst others, other wine enthusiasts, we own vineyards in the Willamette Valley, where we live, but we also get fruit from the Rogue Valley, warm climate varieties like Cabernet Franc, from the Umpqua Valley. It's a little, it's like actually Spain. So we grow varieties like Tempranillo there. And then there's a region that's very famous called the Walla Walla Valley. That's an American viticultural area. And it's actually 1/3 of that AVA is on the Oregon side. And so when you get up to Walla Walla, you go to the town of Walla Walla, you'll find many of those wines come from grapes grown on the Oregon side of the state line. And there you can see our vineyards. So we have 2 vineyards there called Pembrin and Maison Bleu. And that's the Maison Bleu is in the Rocks district of Walla Walla. And I'm telling you, you got to come see this because we had to plant the vines with a crowbar. And then over on you can see an enlarged image of the Willamette Valley. Here you can see the different vineyards. And I started south of Salem at the estate 40 years ago and have now, with my friends and colleagues, grown Willamette Valley into a much more vineyards. Actually, we now farm over 500 acres of vines just in the Willamette Valley. We do it all by hand, all sustainably farmed. And you can see the certifications we've earned at the bottom of your screen. One of the things I wanted to point out to you is if you've opened up one of our bottles and you pulled out the cork, you can see on the cork the Rainforest Alliance symbol and also FSC. We're the very first winery in the world to have received these certifications for using natural cork sourced from the cork growers that follow these standards. And just, I won't belabor this point, but I want to ask all of you to please consider using natural cork, choosing wines with natural cork, because it supports the cork forests of Portugal, Spain, portions of North Africa and Italy. And these cork forests, now something like 10 million acres in the Mediterranean, are the second only to the Amazon in their importance to the world's biosphere. They suck carbon out of the air, they pump oxygen into the air. And so the best way to support them is using natural cork. Unfortunately, people who are using aluminum screw caps or plastic enclosures actually are hurting the cork growers in the Mediterranean, and it's really risking that important part of our really caring for our planet. The next image I wanted to show you is the Tualatin Vineyard, and for this, looking at this vineyard, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to spend a little time learning about, probably one of the most important things that happened in the development of the Oregon wine industry. Now, so it starts with a story. So in this vineyard, by the way, I did not plant this vineyard. This is called Tualatin Estate. It's one of Oregon's very first vineyards. And I'm just the lucky guy that ended up with it, and as well as the others who share ownership in Willamette Valley Vineyards. This vineyard was planted by a fellow named Bill Fuller. Now, Bill Fuller worked for Louis Martini as a winemaker in Napa, but he had a dream of making great Pinot Noir and growing great Chardonnay. And so he says, I've really got to go north. I've got to go to the Willamette Valley. to do that properly. For these thin-skinned grape varieties, I needed a cooler. He said he needed a cooler climate, so he put his family, he put his wife and his kids in the station wagon, and he followed them in a pickup full of cuttings from Napa, drove to Oregon, and planted these vines in 1973. And he was actually the first practicing winemaker. The rest of the people who started our industry were from different walks of life, but Bill Fuller was actually the first professional winemaker to come from Napa and plant this vineyard. And years went by, and I was always after him to see if I could get just a little bit of fruit from his vineyard. And he said to me, he says, well, Jim, no, I need it all. And so this went on for like years, and he finally called me in 1996, and he said, now, Jim, he says, you've always wanted a little of my fruit. And I said, yes, Bill, I just need a little bit. I just want to try to see if I can do what you do. Bill Fuller's was actually one of the most accomplished winemakers in Oregon. He actually is the only winemaker to have ever won the London International Wine Competition in the red category and the white category in the same year for his Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. The trophy was actually presented by the Queen. And so I said, I've got to have just a little bit of this fruit. Well, eventually he called me up and he said, now, Jim, he says, I'm thinking of retiring, so I'll sell you my vineyard. And I said, well, Bill, I said, I don't know if I can do that. That's, I don't know if I have the money to do that. And he says, well, if you want this vineyard, you're going to have to buy the forklift that only goes halfway up. You're going to have to buy the receivables I can't collect. You're going to have to buy the whole business. And I talked him into, because I didn't have the money to do that. So I talked him into merging with me. So he became a shareholder in Willamette Valley Vineyards. We merged the businesses together. And then I went and borrowed the money on the strength of the assets so he'd have some money to retire. And he did that. And this was my big break. And so I want you to try this next wine. This is the Chardonnay. This is the Dijon clone Chardonnay. Now you have 2017 and 2018 in the market there where you are. The last time I actually was in Manchester was for a March of Dimes fundraiser. We were raising money for a March of Dimes, and really sending the message home about responsible use of alcohol in people's lives. And so it's been a long time since I've been able to see you where you live, but I'm looking forward to coming back. But anyway, now you have this Dijon clone Chardonnay in front of you, and I see Carol Ann there. So maybe Carol Ann might be wanting to tell us something.
Yeah, so Jim, that was actually a great segue because somebody on Facebook just asked if you would be coming to the Winter Wine Spectacular this year. Next year.
Well, when is that? What's the date of that?
Chad, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe January 28th or 29th. The last week in January for sure.
Yeah, it's the last week in January. I believe it's January 27th. It's the last Thursday in January.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, it's been a long time. You live in a beautiful part of the United States. I love where you live. And so, Darrell, you'll have to figure out a way to make that happen. You'll have to talk Jan, my wife, into that, because Jan, she actually decides my calendar. I think many of the men here on this viewing this probably know the same thing. But anyway, I love that invitation to come back and also support the work that you're doing, which I admire the work you're doing in the community. Well, now you have this Dijon clone Chardonnay in your glass. I hope some of you do. And even if you have the 2017, 2018, they're really actually pretty similar. We have a cool climate here in the Willamette Valley. 2017 was really pretty cool. And so you're going to find a low pH in this wine, nice blade of acidity, which makes it a wonderful companion, for things like grilled shrimp, or, you got to try this. It's been a long time since I've done this, but try it with chicken pot pie. And especially when it gets cold, on a cold winter day, bake a chicken pot pie and get this wine out. You're going to have like this lemon, hazelnut and honey aromas, maybe a little orange and sweet cream, in the taste. maybe a little vanilla that comes from the barrels and a little caramel that comes. Now we make this wine all in French oak. We actually do it the hard way. So we ferment this Dijon clone Chardonnay in French oak. We hand stir the lees. We only make like about 800 cases of this wine a year. So it's really fairly rare. And you have it. And in fact, I believe that it passed a very important test. So there's some folks there that love this wine, went out into the stores and got us qualified to have this wine sold there. So I want to thank you for doing that. Us, Oregon winemakers need your help to help pull these wines through and make sure we get the listings so that we can have our wines presented to consumers in your stores. So I want to thank you for that. So now I got to tell you about, where does the term Dijon clone come from? Now, a number of you know this, but some of you probably don't know, kind of the whole story behind what happened. So I got to tell you that because we lived through it. So you heard about Richard Sommer coming up, and then you heard about David Lett coming up to Oregon bringing their vines, and they brought their vines from the UC Davis Stanley Ranch. Basically, it's an experimental vineyard that provided cuttings to the winemakers. And and by the way, it was Bill Fuller's boss, Louis Martini, that actually worked with UC Davis to actually create the Stanley Ranch vineyard for research purposes. That was his boss that did that. And anyway, they brought this plant material up. But the problem was that they could only get the Chardonnay ripe in our warmest years. They had really struggled to get the Chardonnay ripe in the cooler, wetter years in the Willamette Valley. So we as winemakers thought, how are we going to solve this problem? And so we thought, well, maybe if we got the native plant material from the mother vines from Burgundy, maybe they would behave differently. So we asked the French if they would help us. And, as you probably know, the French, had kind of they didn't have a real high regard for American winemakers, and they were really sore, as you know, about American winemakers early on using their famous geographic designations like Burgundy or Bordeaux or Chablis or Champagne, because they as you know, carefully guard those geographic designations with very strict standards for growing grapes and making wine. So they were really pissed off, frankly, about some of these American winemakers using those terms. And you probably remember this from some of you on this, on this show, probably remember the Hardy Red Burgundy, or the, those, good heavens. And so they were justifiably unhappy with us as American winemakers. But what we did as Oregon winemakers is we went to our government and we said, please, in our state government, we said, please pass laws that respect French law, that require that wines grown and made in Oregon are only they can only use true geographic designations. They can't use false geographic designations. They can only use the true ones, like Willamette Valley, for example. And they can only use the true varietal name. That's why it's Pinot Gris rather than Pinot Grigio, because Pinot Gris is actually the true varietal name. It originated in Burgundy 230 years ago. And so the French, the Burgundians, they looked at us and thought, maybe Oregon winemakers are different and maybe they're worth helping. And so we had a big break, and they sent us some cuttings. And when they shipped us those cuttings, they put on the outside of the shipping container Dijon clones. Now they're naturally occurring clones. The professors who did the work and the students were from the University of Dijon. By the way, the name of the university's changed now. It's the University of Bourgogne. But back then it was the University of Dijon. And that's how the name stuck, Dijon clones. So when we got together as winemakers, because we wanted more of these clones, and so we talked our governor into leading a trade mission to Burgundy. And so we went to Burgundy to thank them for those very early clones they sent us and to ask for more. And so anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to put your nose in this beautiful. So you actually, if you kind of stick this glass up to your nose and you close your eyes, you might think you've got a Merceau, a Burgundian Chardonnay in your glass. It really is something. And that's one of the reasons why Oregon Chardonnays are now really getting noticed, because they're not like the Chardonnays that Americans have now grown up with, that are grown in those much warmer climates where there's a lot more barrel influence in the wines. Not to say that, those wines don't have a place. Obviously they do. But anyway, try grilled shrimp or maybe a chicken pot pie on a cold evening with this wine. Now this next slide, this one is, this is my next big break. So that you saw the first one, that was Tualatin Estate. That's one of the first vineyards planted in Oregon. I'm a lucky guy. We've got 190 acres planted there, all sustainably grown at Tualatin, up near Forest Grove. And then comes Dick and Betty O'Brien. Now I went to school with Betty. We went to Willamette Graduate School together back in 1978, and we were talking to each other about how much we loved Pinot Noir, and boy, we'd love to plant it someday. And we were both young at that time, and she and her husband talked her parents into letting them plant some Pinot Noir in their vineyard, and they were smart. They named the vineyard after Betty's dad. So Betty's dad's first name is Elton. So maybe that helped convince him that he should let Betty and his son-in-law, Dick, plant Pinot Noir. So they planted in 1983. That's the year I first planted my Pinot Noir. And this vineyard is in what's called the Eola Amity American Viticultural Area. And so this is the Eola Hills, and this slope faces east. It faces the morning sun. So now, some of the grapes that come from this vineyard, I want you to try. And it's the whole cluster fermented Pinot Noir. So I hope all of you have this wine here with you. If this is just the only wine you're going to taste tonight, I call it our fun Pinot Noir. I have some serious Pinot Noirs I want to show you, but this whole cluster Pinot Noir, boy, did it make things for us, because I had this idea when I got fruit from Betty's vineyard, Betty and Dick's vineyard, and fruit from our vineyard. I said, what we ought to do is we ought to try a method called whole cluster fermentation. And instead of separating the berries from the stems in a destemmer, like you would in a traditional way of making Pinot Noir, and having those berries kind of drop into the fermenter where you chill it down, and then you later let the must warm up, and you do punch downs essentially to mix the berries back into the fermenting juice. That's a classic way of making Pinot Noir in a small fermenter, doing punch downs, and because that's the berries have been separated from the stems. But what I did was I thought, no, let's put the clusters in the fermenter whole. Let's use a stainless steel fermenter. Let's chill it down. Let's put argon gas in the fermenter and push all the oxygen out of the fermenter, so we can make sure we don't have any problems with oxidation that could occur. And let's see what happens. Let's see if the juice ferments inside each berry. Now, this method is called carbonic maceration. That's a technical term for it. And so what happened is these black buried clusters in these fermenters would, they'd start fermenting. So every berry was a fermenter, and it would extract color and flavor from inside the skins, and then the berries would eventually burst. And so they'd swell up, turn pink, and burst. So I would basically drain off at the bottom of the fermenter that juice every day, so it didn't stay in contact with the stems and get a stemmy, flavor. So as you put this wine up to your nose, it is going to just knock you over. It's got, blackberries, cherries, raspberries. I mean, it is just coming out of the glass. And I thought, boy, what a unique way to make Pinot Noir. Well, when I did this, I started doing this back in 1991. And many of you have heard about Robert Parker. Well, years ago, when our industry was small, he would fly to Oregon in Portland, and then he would drive around and visit the vineyards because there weren't that very many of us. There weren't very many wineries for him to taste. So he would drive around. Well, he came to the winery, I think, in 1991. I think it was 91 or 92. And he tasted this whole cluster fermented Pinot Noir. And he wrote it up in the Wine Advocate. He said, this is the most delicious and accessible Pinot Noir in the world. So for a young winemaker, it made me. And so as a consequence, this wine has been very popular ever since. But I really, really owe it, frankly, to Robert Parker and the Wine Advocate, which was very powerful at that time in convincing consumers to try new wines. Now, so you taste this wine, not only you're going to get that blackberry, cherry, and raspberry, but you're also going to get in its taste, some dark chocolate and mocha. And so just think about, okay, what would I be, actually you can drink this wine on your porch, watching your spouse garden. But anyway, the thing is that, the food companions for me that really work well for me are things that are like anything that's got a little bit of sweetness in it, like anything that uses like barbecue sauce or anything that's like really spicy, or like, anything with like curry in it. So try this. Now, the home run, obviously, is take this to Thanksgiving dinner. This is the crowd pleaser. And I'll tell you what, take it with some other wines and see what happens. You'll be out of this wine before you know it. Anyway, that's just a little bit about our whole cluster of Pinot Noir and this gorgeous vineyard where some of this Pinot Noir is grown here. I also wanted to tell you just a brief story about how our industry started. You got to think about when we started, there weren't people of great wealth. Now, when you go into the wine industry, you see a lot of people with great wealth in the wine industry who are planting vineyards, building wineries or buying wineries and making them bigger. But back when our industry started, Richard Sommer, he worked as a surveyor. So that's how he met my dad. He was the county surveyor. My dad was at the courthouse quite often in Roseburg. That's where we ran into Richard Sommer. David Lett, the second person who came up to plant Pinot Noir and came to the Willamette Valley, he sold books. He sold textbooks to pay his way. And Dick Erath, he was an electrical engineer and actually worked on rockets. And a fellow named Dick Ponzi, he was a mechanical engineer for Walt Disney. So all these people came from different walks of life. Well, Dick and Betty was the executive director of the Santiam Girl Scouts, which is the biggest Girl Scout chapter in Oregon. And Dick, her husband, who's now passed, Dick was a middle school teacher his entire life. And so what they did was they worked in the evenings and all summer taking care of their vineyard while they had these jobs away from the vineyard, their entire lives. But I got to tell you this. As you know, we have the lease now. I lease this on a long-term basis. And Dick and Betty came to me some years ago and they said, now, Jim, this lease you have is going to outlive us. So here's what we want you to do. We want you, when we pass, to have this vineyard appraised for its true market value at that time. And we want you to take that value and divide it in half. And half of it is to go to Oregon State University's viticulture program. And the other half of the value is to go to Chemeketa Community College's wine program. So their entire life's work, they didn't have any children, their entire life's work, they're giving back to education to support people, young people in learning about our industry. And I'll tell you, if that doesn't give you an idea about the great karma in this wine and the grapes that come from this vineyard, you'll find this story very similar to many other Oregon wine stories. And I see Carol Ann there. She's probably going to want to say something to me.
Jim, I feel like this is working out really well. I turn my camera on when I have a question for you. this isn't, it's not a question, but I did want to interject that we have Kate watching on Facebook tonight, and she says the whole cluster is the best Pinot Noir, and she's happy to be watching tonight. So I just wanted to make sure you knew.
Well, I'm hoping that she is she's the first then to respond to you quickly on that big grand prize, because I'd love to be able to show her these vines and actually have her meet Betty. You need to meet this wonderful person, Betty O'Brien. I've known her, and worked with her closely ever since I first met her in 1978. Betty and Dick planted an extraordinary garden that you've got to see. Eventually, we're going to build a tasting room right next to this garden. And what they did was, when they were planting their vines, they had all these big, huge jory boulders they had to move out of the vineyard. And so they put all these big boulders off to the side, and then they planted this big garden amongst all these boulders. You have got to see this thing. Anyway, I wanted to show you, if you look at this picture, you're going to see a white rock down in the middle of the vineyard, right there. And so this next slide is going to show you a close-up of that rock. And this rock actually serves as the family's headstone for both Betty's parents, Elton and Penny Ingram. And there's Dick. Of course, it's also now serves as his headstone. And so you can get a sense of the size of this rock. Now, here's what you got to know. That rock is called a glacial erratic. So I want you to imagine that you are paddling a canoe down the Willamette River about 16,000 years ago. And if you were, you would have looked up and seen a wall of rock, mud, water, and ice over 500 feet high coming at you at about 80 miles an hour. Now imagine that. Hopefully somebody in this presentation knows that I'm not just making this up. This actually happened. It's one of the most remarkable events in geology that we know about. The largest flood that we have record of is called the Missoula Lake flood. It occurred actually in that time range between 14,000 and 16,000 years ago, where the glacier, an advancing glacier from Canada, dammed up the middle fork of the Clark River. The water flooded all the way back up into Montana, forming one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. And then there was so much hydraulic pressure that built up that it snapped the nose off of that glacier, and all this water came draining out at once, also bringing chunks of ice from the glacier with it. It came across, it actually started up near Ponderay Lake. That's Ponderay Lake is actually where the nose of the glacier dug a big hole in the ground. And the water came pouring out. It formed Coeur d'Alene Lake. It spread out across eastern Washington, and it followed the Columbia River drainage down to the Pacific Ocean. So when you come to visit, I want you to fly into Portland. You're only about 15 minutes away from one of the great wonders of the world, the Multnomah Falls. So you'll drive your rental car to Multnomah Falls, about 15 minutes from the airport. And if you want, you can actually hike all the way up to the top of Multnomah Falls. That's over 650 feet in elevation. And you can find rocks from Canada at the top of the falls. So this is a white granite rock from Canada that was in the middle of a chunk of glacier that rafted down in that Missoula Lake flood. Now, why is this important to the wine that you're tasting? Is because it brought all that topsoil from eastern Washington into the Willamette Valley, and it created a soil composition like no other in the world. So it's not just our weather that produces some of these remarkable cool climate varieties like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Pinot Gris. It's also the most unique soil composition in the world. Now, this next slide is another part of the Willamette Valley story, and so you've probably seen a few sparkling wines from the Willamette Valley. Well, we're gonna do this in a big way, because we've got a story to tell people. Not only does the North Willamette grow these still wines, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, really well, but it also, because of the way our climate works in the fall, we get lots of flavor at very low Brix levels, very low sugar levels in the fruit. We get lots of flavor. just like they do in Champagne, where it's much cooler. So the grapes ripen in a way in the North Willamette, very similar to Champagne. And so this is a Method Champenoise sparkling winery that we're building right now. So if you come after May, you're going to come be able to see it completed. And it's called Domaine Willamette. And so you'll eventually see sparkling wine from our winery called Domaine Willamette. And this entire vineyard and garden is biodynamically farmed. So for example, we sustainably farm all of our fruit, right? And that's under the live standards, low input viticulture enology standards. So it's very, very strict standards. It's really beyond organic. As how we as winemakers, Oregon winemakers, are committed to providing a very healthy product for our customers, but also doing it the right way without damaging other wildlife, other living creatures. We want to make sure that we farm and make our wines the right way, the way that each one of us, of you here in this presentation, would expect us to do, is to respect our neighbors and to respect all life. So that's how we farm, and that's true of other Oregon winemakers. So even if you can't find our wines, please buy Oregon wines wherever you see them and support Oregon winemakers who are committed to sustainable practice. Now, this next wine for this is our Dijon Clone Pinot Noir. Now, this, by the way, is this 2019 is our first release of this Dijon Clone Pinot Noir. These are the Dijon clones we got from Burgundy, from the professors there. And I just poured some into my glass. This is 2019. And actually, your market, New Hampshire, is the first place on the entire East Coast to be able to taste this wine and to try this wine. And I believe it is now in a test. So I'm asking all of the viewers to go into the stores. And if you can find this wine, please buy it so we can pass the test. What do you say, Carol Ann?
Chad, how did we get so lucky to be one of the first to have this?
Well, it has to do with Durrell. Durrell, she's a very, very effective Oregon wine advocate, but also inside our company. And so she was the one who arranged this. And, the other thing too is that, you have, your customers are really sophisticated wine consumers, and you have very good representation, whether it's through distribution or whether it's in retail. You have very, very knowledgeable people. It's a great place to start telling this story on the East Coast.
Chad, how readily available is this?
I'm sure we've got enough to figure out how to at least supply your market. Now, when you put this wine up to your nose, you're going to get that classic, red cherry. You're going to get cranberry, and some baking spice. And then you taste this wine, you're going to see how juicy this is. This is really juicy. And if you let it age, if you're patient enough, make sure you get enough bottles so you've got some that you can just, lay down for a little while. And what'll happen is the tannins will get silkier and silkier. And you can tell by this wonderfully long finish on this wine that this wine's it's a great way to tell this Dijon clone story. Only Oregon and has the story that you can tell others that you enjoy wine with. So it's very unique, very special. Now, my wife makes actually the first dinner I had in her home when I first, was dating her years ago, she made me chicken marsala, and I brought some Pinot Noir, and I'll tell you what, that combination of chicken marsala and Pinot Noir, or this Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, is perfect. Or try anything like with like pasta and mushrooms. So try that. But there's all kinds of other things, even flatbreads or pork tenderloin, but just pizza, I think, is going to be great with this wine. Yum. Now this next slide is just a way of you seeing how unusual we are, and I can see we have somebody actually on this presentation that's from where my daughter lives. Liz lives in Sydney, Australia, and she loves playing beach volleyball, she lives near Manly Beach. And so it's wonderful to have somebody from Sydney, in this presentation. But anyway, here you can see in this image something unusual. Now, you heard that we started our winery basically with very little. I mean, when I started, I didn't even have enough money for drip irrigation to drip irrigate the vines, and so I bought 17 lengths of 75-foot garden hose on sale, and that's how I first started watering the vines. Well, I had the idea years ago that there was other wine enthusiasts that would be interested in joining me in building Willamette Valley Vineyards. Now, back then, it was actually illegal to sell securities or sell ownership in a company to people who were not qualified investors. So qualified investors were people who make over, $250,000 a year. This was back in 1983. And people have more than $2 million in assets. You can sell all the ownership in your company to those people all you want, but you can only have only total of 35 owners who are unqualified, people who make less than $250,000 a year. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know anybody who makes over that. All the people I know are my friends, my neighbors. And so I thought, well, how do I grow Willamette Valley Vineyards with the help of wine enthusiasts who aren't qualified under the federal law? So I asked the Securities and Exchange Commission if there's anything I could do. And they said, well, you could become a publicly held company and you'd have to qualify with us to do that. So we did the very first self-underwritten public offering in the country of any business to start Willamette Valley Vineyards. It's very unusual. Now they call it crowdfunding. And so, but we were the very first, and thank goodness we were successful. So it was a great company for for new laws in finance to be developed. And President Obama, signed a very important piece of legislation, the Jobs Act, which actually made it more possible for people to what they call crowdfund today. But anyway, we now have over 20,000 wine enthusiasts who own a piece of Willamette Valley Vineyards. And we're selling preferred stock, Willamette Valley Vineyards Preferred, WVVIP. We're selling it directly to the investor, so it saves the money on the commissions. So we're not selling it through an investment banker because it's easy to sell. And no sense in people paying brokerage commissions. But the stock is freely traded on the NASDAQ. So you can go on the NASDAQ, type in WVVIP, and you can see what it traded at today and how many shares traded. And we're selling these shares for $5.05 a share until the end of September. And then the price will go up to $5.15 a share. And so we're selling that. We've already sold about $5 million worth of this stock to help us grow, to help us finance all these new vineyards we're planting and these wineries we're building. I can't wait to build. We're building right now some tasting room restaurants to expand and tell the story of, find a location there. Maybe we could do something there. Anyway, that's just a little bit of a background. And we do have a lot of wine enthusiasts, wine club members as well. So that's just a little bit of history there. So in an invitation for you to consider contacting us to see if you'd like to become a winery owner. My thinking is if you drink wine, you might as well own the winery. And you get lots of benefits in addition to, of course, the appreciation in your investment. And we actually issue a dividend, an annual dividend that people can convert into wine credit for even more value. This last slide is just, there's Carol Ann again.
I love this. I should do this with every live event. Jim, I just wanted to read you a great comment that just came through because I know you're presenting, so you can't see them all. But so Lou, who's watching here on Zoom, loves the presentation. Very interesting webinar on the history of your vineyard. We had the pleasure of visiting you in 2018 and had planned to revisit in 2020, but COVID stopped that. I feel you, Lou. 2 trips canceled for me. We have dear friends that live in Salem and hope to see them next year. We own stock in your company and are thrilled that your wines are readily available in New Hampshire. Lou and Chris from Rye.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I can't wait for them to come out and bring their family members out to see us. You know, we have, you can see here, this is the estate winery just south of Salem, Oregon, in the Salem Hills. And in that building that you see there we have actually a remarkable chef. Actually, we've been voted the best dining experience in the Mid Valley of the Willamette Valley. We have a chef in the tasting room, and we do food and wine pairings, wonderful meals there with wine. And as you can see, the suites there's the suites over there. My wife built. They're actually, my wife she really gets things done. And so these are LEED Gold certified when she constructed those. And then she actually got tired of living in that trailer. We lived at the top of the hill. So she actually built the house up at the top of the hill. So there's a lot of things, you probably know this, I mean, in your own lives, that, we don't ever do things alone, right? We do them with the help of many others. And I've got to tell you that, Willamette Valley Vineyards would not be what it is, not produce what we do without the help of my wife. She's actually supervising the construction of Domaine Willamette, our sparkling winery that's being built near Dundee. And so this is the last slide I had for you, just to kind of give you an idea of what we want you to come and visit. This last wine that you're tasting, this is our flagship. This is our estate Pinot Noir, classic Oregon Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley AVA. We grow all these grapes ourselves. We tend the vines by hand ourselves. And we make this wine in our cellar right here. And this is really just a delicate, elegant representation. So whenever you're thinking about, hey, I want a Pinot Noir from Oregon, I want a Pinot Noir that represents the Willamette Valley, you can have confidence in getting this wine, choosing this wine, and serving this wine in representing the best of what we do as winemakers here in the Willamette Valley. And then it's got that wonderful minerality, and it's got a kind of a real layering finish. And of course, you think about it, like lamb, duck, pork, salmon. It's a wonderful, very versatile companion. Anyway, that's what I have for you. I know that we got some business to conduct today, don't we?
Yeah, so we have to tell the people how they're going to possibly win their wine barrel or their trip out to visit you, Jim.
Well, I'm going to be drinking here, so somebody else needs to talk. Who's going to do that?
All right. I'll take care of that. Let me get my computer situated. In case I go in and out at all, everybody, I was having a little bit of computer trouble, which is why I turned my camera off. But it actually worked out, because then when I put it back on, Jim knew I needed to ask him something. So just in case there's any craziness, Chad will take over. All right. So tonight we are going to be doing a little bit of trivia. And those trivia questions are going to be what potentially wins everybody who is tuning in tonight the wine barrel, which you'll have to pick up here in New Hampshire, or the trip to Oregon to hang out with Jim. So let's start closer to home with the wine barrel. Now, I will tell you, this question is a little bit easier, so it should get you ready for what's to come. So the question is, what is the name of the winemaker that inspired Jim to get into the wine industry? So if you are watching on Zoom, please respond in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, please leave a comment. Everybody who answers correctly is going to be entered to win. And we have a few correct answers. So this is for the barrel. And again, that question is, what is the name of the winemaker that inspired Jim to get into the wine industry? So I'm just seeing what we have on Facebook. So you know what, while those answers come in, Jim, another question for you. One of our viewers on Facebook is wondering if you have a preferred type of wine glass.
Oh my gosh. I love Riedel. I don't know if you can see me here. I'm drinking out of you come to Oregon, I got to tell you, I got a whole story to tell you about this glass. This is called the Oregon Pinot Noir glass in Oregon. But Poor George Riedel, when he made this wine glass for us, because I was one of the winemakers that worked with him to make this glass shape. Lynn Penner-Ash and the Ponzis were as well. And anyway, he now calls it the XL series because everybody in the world wanted their own wine glass for their region. So he made a big boo-boo. And so that's why it's called the XL series. But anyway, Riedel is the best in bringing out the aromas and flavors because of their unique shapes for every variety.
All right, everybody. So the answers have slowed down a bit. So just bear with me for 1 second. I am going to tell you what the correct answer is while I pull the random winner. But before I do, Riedel, they are really great. If you would like to learn a little bit more about them, we had Riedel on in March for a live event where they actually talked us through some of their different glassware. So you can watch the replay of that on our YouTube. We do sell, I think, 6 different Riedel glasses in our stores too. So when you come for your wine, get your glasses too.
You know, when Max came out to visit us, we taught him, I took him to a Western bar and we taught him how to line dance. It was kind of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Without further ado, the winner of the wine barrel is Lou from here on Zoom. Congratulations, Lou. I am putting my email address in the chat. Please shoot me over an email and we will coordinate your barrel pickup.
That was Richard Summer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jim. Sorry, guys, I forgot to tell you the right answer. So everybody who answered correctly was entered into a randomizer and a random name was chosen. And so we're going to do that again now with our next question. All right, so this is for the sweet stay. I am super jealous that somebody is going to win this. Take me with you, please. What is the name of the new winery that Jim is building in Dundee, and what farming practices are being used there? So this is a two-parter, a little bit harder. You have to get 2 pieces of question right in order to be eligible to win. So while you guys think about that, Jim, we have another question for you. If you weren't a winemaker, what do you think you would be?
Well, wow, that's tough. I mean, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, I told my staff that they're going to carry me out of here. I'm not even retiring. So I don't know what, I don't know what to tell you about that. I suppose, I love history. So I would probably spend a lot of time learning about early human history, probably.
Very cool. And so I have another question too, which I thought was going to be a hard one. Which of your wines is your favorite?
That's not a fair question to ask a winemaker. And that's, because there's just depends on what you're doing, your mood. I mean, it's just the same for every one of you, right? I mean, what are you having? What are you doing? What are you doing it with? All I do is I don't drink wine. I don't buy wine or drink wine out of a can because often aluminum is made with burning coal and you know what's going on with coal. Most of the aluminum we get is made in China with coal fired. So I stay out of that. I don't buy anything with a screw cap or a plastic cork. Other than that, you'll see me consume a lot of my fellow winemakers' wines.
If somebody has never, I'm going to expand on that. I think a lot of people ask that question because they're curious about which of your wines they should try first, thinking if it's your favorite, they might like it. So I'm going to put a spin on that. What would you recommend as a first Willamette wine for somebody to try?
It really depends on the nature of the wine consumer. If the wine consumer is just beginning, I would say try that whole cluster fermented Pinot Noir. But even if you're a really sophisticated wine consumer, I would say try the whole cluster Pinot Noir after you've enjoyed our estate Pinot Noir. It's going to be a 2-bottle night.
Nice. All right, everybody, one more question for Jim while I let you get some more answers in. We do have quite a few correct answers. Let's see, we've got quite a few questions. Which one should we ask you? There's just so many. Sorry. All right. You know what? Let's just go ahead and tell everybody the answer. So, Jim, do you want to tell our viewers what the correct answer is for that second trivia question that is going to get them out to visit you?
The winery's name, the brand name, which you haven't seen on a bottle yet, is Domaine Willamette. And we chose that name because it symbolizes a sparkler, like Domaine Chandon, things like that. But the other is that it represents the valley, Willamette, where we grow these grapes in the Willamette AVA. And then we grow at Bernau Estate Vineyard, where this winery is located, the vineyard named after me and my family. We grow these grapes biodynamically. In fact, we're going to grow everything in the garden biodynamically. So we're going to teach you all about that. You come to the winery, we're going to teach you all about biodynamic farming and why it makes a difference.
All right, guys. So the winner of the sweet prize is Natalie W. Natalie, I'm going to share my email address. Please email me to claim your prize. And I think we'll end with one last question related to what we just went through. Jim, a few people have asked if you can explain biodynamic farming. I know that the answer is kind of long, but maybe can you give us the elevator pitch version of it?
Yeah, it's not easy. Rudolf Steiner, back in the early 1920s, really coined the phrase biodynamic farming. And what it really does is as farmers, we look at the cosmos. In other words, the whole. We look at all things that influence those vines and life. And the things that influence vines and life, we all know in our lives influence us, whether it's the gravitational forces of the moon or whether it's the light that's put on the vines at night by the moon or the stars or the constellations. It takes into consideration the organic preparations that we spray and apply onto the leaves of the vines. So it's a form of natural farming that takes into consideration all things, not just whether it's your organic farming or commercially farming. So that's what I would say. It's a complex subject, but it means that we're farming. We're looking at that farm as a whole, so that farm is totally sustainable within itself. And so when you come, you might actually come across a few sheep that are grazing there and trotting in the vineyard of to help develop the undergrowth and control the undergrowth of the vines. It's a big subject.
Thank you very much for the little introduction to the subject. Natalie, you're going to get to hear all about it when you head out to Oregon, you lucky duck. Oh, all right, everybody. We have had such a great night. I think let's just go through it all again. Jim, what do you say? One more round, another tasting?
I'll tell you what, I haven't consumed all the bottles I've opened here, so I got plenty of time.
Well, actually, Jim, one more question.
Yes.
Personal question.
What do you got?
When we get off the phone tonight, I'm going downstairs to have some chorizo tacos. Which one of your wines should I drink?
What have you got? Have you got them all?
Maybe.
Oh. You know what? How many tacos?
Probably 2. I'll probably have 2 tacos.
Okay. Well, that means that's at least a 4 wine meal.
Perfect.
So now it's just a process of elimination.
Okay, I guess I'll just drink them all.
Yeah, you think about what's in a taco. Sometimes you've got some wonderful cod, right, in that taco. So that's like Pinot Gris, right? But you said it was cold there tonight, right? So you need a red.
Yeah, it was a bit chilly before I came up.
Now,
I came to the studio.
If the taco's pretty spicy, that calls for a whole cluster to stand up to all that spice in the taco. But if it's not like overwhelmingly spicy, my go-to is the estate Pinot Noir.
All right, you talked me into it. Mary here on Zoom is asking if we can all go on a road trip to visit you, maybe in May. I'll be in Ireland in May, sorry, but maybe during the summer. we can go visit Jim. All right,
I'd love it.
everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. It was such a pleasure having you here with us.
Carol
Such a
Ann,
great.
thank you. Thank you, Christian, Zach, and I think you had Chad too on the call, Darrell. And to all your viewers and listeners, thank you very much for supporting sustainable practice and supporting my Oregon winemakers and my colleagues. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We hope we'll see you in January. But for now, have a great night and we'll talk soon. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.